What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. Two great guests for you this week. We've got Emory Hunt of Football Gameplan and CBS Sports. We also have Cincinnati receiver Alec Pierce, one of Greg Cosell's favorites. We just talked about him on last week's episode. We said, if we can get him on the podcast, let's do it. Let's find out more about this guy's game. Let's find out how much the Patriots have been in contact with him this offseason as he preps for the draft. If they're looking for size and speed at receiver, why not Alec Pierce? But first, we're just getting back from the league's annual meetings in Palm Beach, Florida, down at the Breakers Resort. Wanted to hit you with a few quick hit notes from what we were able to gather down there in terms of information. I think, number one, it's just to take a big picture look at how the Patriots have built this offseason. We're all looking at all the money they spent last year. We're looking at the players they have re-signed this year, some of the new players that they have acquired this year, and obviously the approach to spending has been very different. I think we've looked at this and said, well, there must be some kind of decree from on high, from ownership, telling Bill Belichick, listen, we have to be conservative this offseason based on what we did last offseason. And maybe that has handcuffed the Patriots approach. But my belief is that that hasn't been the case, that this is just Bill Belichick's view of what smart team building is. If you spend a lot one off season and you're looking to the future, and those guys are all still under contract, they're all still relatively young, and you're projecting out and you're projecting improvement from those players, if you can get what you're expecting from them in 2022, you shouldn't have to spend exorbitant sums of money to make sure your team is in a position to contend, which is what Robert Kraft told us he's expecting them to do. I think had Bill Belichick wanted to spend more, if he wants to go pay $10 million for DJ Chark or Marquez Valdez-Scantling, or he wants to sign Allen Robinson on a deal that pays about $15 a year, he would have been within his rights and had the opportunity to do that, is my belief. But again, this is the slow build. This is a conservative approach. This is a disciplined approach by Bill Belichick. And my belief is this is how he views is the best way to build a team to achieve sustained success long-term. Of course, that's what ownership wants, but that's what Bill Belichick is looking for too, even as he's looking at his 70th birthday next year. It's not, let's go all in, let's max out. It's not necessarily, we've got a young quarterback, we've got to push the pedal to the floor in terms of how we're attacking our team building approach and our attacking our spending approach. That's just not Bill Belichick's style. It was last year to buy a team that went from below 500 to back in the postseason, but that's not what he views is sustainable. If he wanted to do it, my belief is he would have had the okay to, but this is the route he's chosen. A couple of other things. Heard from an AFC executive familiar with the Patriots program saying that the Patriots' speed defensively still concerning. That was not too long before the Patriots ended up signing Jabril Peppers, former Giants safety, former Browns safety. Really interesting signing, in my opinion. Does it solve all their speed concerns? No, but now you have another defender at the second level, play at that linebacker level, who has safety speed and gives the Patriots flexibility. That's the word that I continued to hear over and over again when I spoke to evaluators after this deal was made. This provides the Patriots flexibility to match up. So when you're looking at some of the positions that the Patriots had the most difficulty with last year, running backs out of the backfield in the passing game, slot receivers, tight ends. Now you have not only Peppers, but Kyle Duggar, Adrian Phillips, Devin McCourty, if you want to throw him down there. Jonathan Jones is coming back to play the slot. You should have a good core of athletic, aggressive, good tacklers in the middle of the field at that second level, that short to intermediate area of the field, to be able to clean up some of the messes that they experienced in that range last year. So Peppers, number one, I would say, quickly becomes your replacement for Gunnar Olszewski as your top punt returner. But number two, he gives you that flexibility to be able to match up. All three safeties, I think, that are looking like strong safeties, Peppers, Duggar, Phillips, could end up mixing and matching. If you play Buffalo and you see Dawson Knox in line and you see Devin Singletary a line next to Josh Allen in the shotgun, and you maybe see Gabriel Davis, for instance, used as a bigger slot, now you have 3 players that you can look at and say, okay, we're going to have to figure this out. We might have to even figure it out mid-play, mid-snap, depending on how they run their routes. And we can pass guys off and we can exchange and we can still feel good about how we are able to roll with these guys athletically. I think it just gives the Patriots a little bit more flexibility to handle those spots that really gave them issues last year. Another nugget. How about Jonnu Smith at fullback? Really? Make him the highest paid fullback in football? I don't think it's going to be a full-time role for Jonnu Smith, but heard from one team builder who suggested, listen, this is what Bill Belichick would love, is if he can save the roster spot that normally goes to a fullback and give it to somebody at another position. To me, Smith makes the most sense there. Then that's the ultimate Bill Belichick move. Now, Jonnu Smith, who's going to be at the Patriots offseason program this year, has a lot to continue to learn, and he has a lot of room to continue to grow, obviously, in this offense. He just was never able to catch up after missing a lot of the offseason program last year, in my opinion, and it showed when the fall rolled around. He should be in a different spot this year, and I think they'll try to change some things schematically to benefit Smith, whether it's playing him at fullback, using more 2 tight end sets. But I think this is primarily on Smith. He has to show them that he can be used in those situations. The Patriots would have loved to be a 2 tight end offense last year, but very simply was not their best formation. They were lacking in talent and ability to execute, plain and simple, when Smith and Hunter Henry were out there. It's why you saw it so seldomly. They were better off with 3 receivers. They were better off with 2 backs. So can he improve? Can he get more confident to the point where you can become more of a 2 tight end offense and you can be that flexible offense that you envisioned for yourselves last year, where Smith can be used in the slot, in line, in the backfield at times, as a running back at times, as a lead blocker, as a threat in the passing game out of the backfield. All of those things were things they would have loved to do last year. He just wasn't able to help them consistently enough for them to be able to trust him in those spots. But if he can improve, if he can get more confident, more comfortable in the system, I think you'd see Jonnu Smith a little bit more in the backfield, maybe a little bit like a Kyle Juszczyk in San Francisco, who does a little bit of everything for them. Okay, last nugget before we get to our interviews. Lots of rumors swirling about DK Metcalf. Is he long for Seattle? And if he's not, would it be smart for the Patriots to try to bring him in? That's not a move I would bet on the Patriots making, even though he seems to check a lot of boxes for them right now. He does check a lot of boxes, and you never say never with Bill Belichick. Okay. So let's not completely rule it out. But this is an elite specimen at the position. And we just saw, I'm not saying he's on Tyreek Hill's level, but we just saw what the Dolphins gave up just to trade for Tyreek Hill, to have the opportunity to sign him to a massive extension. Now, again, I'm not saying that's what it would take for a team to acquire DK Metcalf, but you're in all likelihood talking about pretty significant draft capital for a player on the last year of his deal that's going to be looking for a big extension. Maybe not market setting, but significant money in that extension. This isn't a Brandon Cook situation where you could trade away a first round pick, you get him for a year, you trade him again, you get a first round pick back. This would be somebody you'd have to be giving something real up to get. And then to make whatever that trade was worthwhile, you'd have to seriously consider then paying him to make sure that he sticks around for a long time. Is DK Metcalf worth that kind of investment? If the pick to get him is only a 4th rounder, then of course that's a different story. But if you're talking about 2nd round, 1st round, more than that even potentially, then that's where I think it's safe to say the Patriots would not be in on that kind of maneuver. Again, never say never, but I wouldn't bet on it based on some of the conversations that I've had. What I would anticipate is that the draft would be the more likely outcome for a player at that position. It's a loaded draft at that position. There are size and speed players available. Again, we're talking to one in this week's podcast in just a few minutes. So DK Metcalf, I would say, don't bet on it. Look to the draft, as we always do. And I want you to look to NBCSportsBoston.com because we have a mock draft out. Just came out a couple of days ago. The Patriots adding more speed, more versatility, whether it's at the second level, at the third level of their defense, in Michigan's Dax Hill. You can read all about why I have the Patriots making that move. They actually trade down to be able to draft Dax Hill. I think based on his size and his athleticism, that he would be a player you would be open to at least trying at boundary corner. It's something that he played a little bit of at Michigan. He was more of a slot or a safety for the Wolverines, but he played for Don Brown. Really smart, really instinctive is what evaluators will tell you about him. He just feels like a perfect Patriot. In my write-up, I said he has a little bit of a Devin McCourty feel to him because of that football IQ, because of that versatility, play him on special teams. These were all things that people said about Devin McCourty when he was coming out of Rutgers over a decade ago. And I think Dax Hill has a chance to not only be serviceable right now with McCourty still on the team, because you could play him in all these different spots. And if the Patriots are moving towards positionless football, he would fit right in seamlessly as somebody who could play corner. But if they're playing zone, he's comfortable taking a tight end who comes into his zone, or he's comfortable passing off one receiver for another because of his intelligence, because of his instincts, because of his awareness in the secondary. He feels like an ideal Patriots fit defensively. He joined Josh Uche, Cam McGrone, Peppers, all as Michigan guys who played for friend of the Next Pats podcast, Don Brown, who's now the head coach at UMass, but was the DC for Michigan. So for me, that feels like the kind of pick the Patriots would like to make. Late in the first round, early in the second round, maybe they'd have to trade up in the second if they wanted to draft him in that range. But again, this just feels like a Patriots type. And I know there's some love for him at one Patriot place these days. All right, I've prattled on long enough here. We have to get to Emory Hunt. Again, phenomenal job by him. Check out Football Game Plan's draft guide, the biggest draft guide in the history of the universe, is what you will soon discover in our conversation with Emory. Let's get to it right now. All right, absolutely fired up right now to have our guy, Emory Hunt, owner of the Football Game Plan, host everywhere. You've seen him on CBS Sports. You're seeing him do the color commentary for college football games. This guy is an absolute dynamo. We've had him on every year. I think this is your third or fourth year here on Next Pats, Emory. So we really appreciate you being on, man. Thanks for being with us.
Always a pleasure, man. I enjoy coming on and talking ball with you because, again, it's that time of the year. And we've talked about a lot of prospects over the years.
We have. And I would argue more prospects than anyone in the world in this year's coming draft class, because you just finished your 2022 NFL draft guide. Over 1,000 individual prospect scouting reports. Nobody has over 1,000. You'll see a few hundred here or there, and that's a lot of work. I get it, but nobody's got as many as you do, Emory. Let's call it, can we call this the largest draft guide in the history of the world? I mean, can we just say that here today on the program?
You can, because it is. Find a draft guide that's bigger. So it is the largest draft guide in draft guide history. And again, it's a solo effort. So you have people that have teams of draft analysts that don't cover that many prospects. So yeah, it is the largest draft guide in draft guide history.
All right, make sure you're following Emory at Football Gameplan, and I'm going to retweet your tweet where you have the link to your draft guide so our listeners can run and go get that thing, because phenomenal work every single year from you when you put that out. It's a must-have if you're into the draft. And so, Emory, let's get into some of these guys, because we're digging into different positions now. You know, the free agency, the initial wave of free agency sort of behind us. The league meetings are behind us. Now we've got about a month here to go all in on the draft, something that you've been doing for much longer than we've been. There's one position, Emory, that I want to ask you about, because it's a spot that we really haven't dug in on all that much just yet, and it's running back. And I think the reason we haven't looked at it that closely from a Patriots standpoint is because you look at their team and you say, well, they've got Ramondre Stevenson. They've got Damian Harris. They just brought James White back. They should be okay in that regard. But they were looking really hard at Leonard Fournette. And I know they were very interested in bringing him on as a free agent. And if they had brought him on as a free agent, my understanding is the Patriots would have at least been, I think, willing to listen on Damian Harris, who's in the last year of his rookie deal. And, we understand the history of that position, especially if you're coming from a Patriots school of thought, maybe better to part a year or two too early rather than a year or two too late. And so I want to put it to you, Leonard Fournette, obviously pretty unique guy in terms of his size, his ability to catch the football. But are there all-purpose backs, like true three-down backs in this year's draft that, won't be first or maybe even second-round picks, but guys that have some size, have the ability to catch the football, a lot like Stevenson, that could maybe be a Leonard Fournette type in your view?
Absolutely. You think about this draft class, number one is deep at running back, especially when you consider the type of running backs you're going to get. You may look at someone like an Isaiah Spiller, who's some people, have as a first round talent, and you can make a case that he should be there. But that's someone that kind of fits the Patriots mold of a guy that can, carry the ball 3 downs. He actually reminds me of a guy that Patriots had on their roster in Jeremy Hill. So that's his game to me. But if you go deeper than that, you look at someone like a Zamir White, who wasn't asked to catch a lot of passes at Georgia, but that's something that he wasn't asked to do. Wasn't necessarily he can't do it. He's someone I think has tremendous burst and explosiveness and also can catch the football. But if you go even deeper, I like Rashad White out of Arizona State. Kind of reminds me of a throwback in Harvey Williams, long runner, has that smooth ability. He's fluid. He can catch the football. He doesn't need volume. And if you want someone that's probably in the mode of your James White, how about CJ Verdell out of Oregon? He battles some injuries at Oregon, but when he has the football in his hands, he's explosive. He's dynamic. We saw what he did against Ohio State. He had that 70-something yard touchdown run. Those are some of the guys I can see kind of filling that role. But if you're talking about, the bigger back guy, I think Isaiah Spiller is someone to keep an eye on, even though he may go late round 1 or even in round 2, especially if they were kicking the tires around on a Leonard Fournette, like you mentioned.
Yeah, it's always interesting to try to keep track of what they're trying to do. I mean, you mentioned some great names there, and you're right. Like, it's nice to have that 3-down size and receiving ability, but they might be. I mean, James White is on the other side of 30 now. He's coming off a significant injury. So even though he's back, that's a spot that I would think they would want to make sure they have shored up. It's just too important to their offense, that true 3rd-down back, that receiving back role. So some really good names for you to bring up to us there. Is there anybody, Emory, at the cornerback spot that to you feels like a Patriot? And this is a position where I think we can talk about your first, your second rounders, because I think they'd be that interested in making sure that they had some real talent at that position. Are there any favorites of yours that feel like Patriots types at corner this year?
Kaiir Elam out of Florida. It's funny, in his scouting report, I put, his dude barely has weaknesses. It's like you have to really dig deep and be nitpicky to really find something to knock his game. So I think he's peerless, in my opinion. So he would be someone that I would definitely take in the first round. You also look at you got Zaire Elam. You look at the corner from Sam Houston State that I'm a big fan of, Zion McCollum. He's 6'2", about 195, 4'3" something in the 40, 4'4" in the 40, can jump out the gym. He can mirror and match. If you go back and watch their game from the spring season, when they played in the spring, they played North Dakota State. He had Christian Watson in crisis mode. Like, he was in a witness protection program. Couldn't find him because Zion McCollum was right there, locked step, put them put the clamps on him. So that's someone that can really do the job and do the job really well. So I think they're perfect Patriot players because they can, they're long, they're athletic. They can match up well against anybody. And, I just think that from a positional standpoint, those 2 guys that I am super high on that would be ideal fits, in my opinion, for what New England wants to do out there on the perimeter. And they can play the ball. Can you score? Can you take the ball away? If you can take the ball away, I want you on my team. They can definitely do that.
Yeah, McCollum's a really interesting name because he just tested like such an absolute freak. Emory, I mean, when you're talking about the low 40 time and the shuttle time and the 3-cone, I mean, some of the numbers are eye-popping, especially at his size. Like you said, he's 6'2". So he's not some little water bug out there who can just, change direction in a blink, but he's a bigger body who seems to be able to change direction in a blink. What I want to ask you, because you study these guys, for somebody like me who sees, okay, the test results, I don't know a whole lot about Zion McCollum's game. Does that change of direction show up for him on the field? Because I know that's something that the Patriots really value highlight. With Malcolm Butler, for instance, he ran a horrible 40 at the Alabama Pro Day when he was coming out of West Alabama a few years ago. But when they watched him on tape, it was his change of direction that they saw. It took him, there were no false steps in his movement. And they bring him in, they see the same thing, and it blows them away. And we know the story of Malcolm Butler now, and he's back now. So does that type of quickness, that agility, that acceleration, does that show up on the field from McCollum?
Absolutely. Because again, when you think about, and it's good to, this is why when you look at prospects from certain schools that are really good, they go against good talent in practice. So Zion McCollum is going up against Jaquez Ezzard, who is a phenomenal receiver, who is someone that tore up the NFLPA game, got the call up to the Senior Bowl, first day of practice, was tearing those guys up. And so he's going to get this dude in practice. And that dude is 5'9", 190. So he has to be able to keep up with him. And then you fast forward to him, guarding Christian Watson. And Watson is someone that we've seen now, at the combine, but we saw this on film, how quick he is for a tall receiver. He's 6'5", 6'4". They use him in the backfield at times. It gave him the rock. He was returning kicks, so you have to have good footwork to return kicks. And so he's able to put him, in a lockdown mode. That tells you all you need to know about his ability to mirror and match, his foot quickness, his ability to change direction, the fluidness of his hips. And also when let's say someone gets past him, and this is something that stood out to me the most, he's never panicked when he's trying to just turn and just break camp just to get back into the play. He's turning because remember, he's 6'2". So he really is never beat or out of the play. He just has to get close enough to where he can reach out and bat the ball down. So everything that he does it really well for someone that's 6'2", because you expect someone that's 6'2" to not have the fluidity and the way he's able to move of a 5'9" corner. And that's what makes him legit special, in my opinion.
I want to stay on this topic because you're so good with with every prospect, Emory, but you are more on top of the non-Power 5 guys than anybody I know. And you just wrote on CBSSports.com, great work there, Football Gameplan as well, but great stuff on CBSSports.com. And you just wrote your starting 11 on the defensive side for small school prospects. And this is great because I'm going to be honest with you, Emory. We've got some schools on here that I quite frankly have never heard of before. Delta State, Julius Falk, Delta State. I couldn't tell you where Delta State is. I'm going to look it up as soon as our conversation's over here, but he's on your starting 11 and he seems like the kind of versatile, big, athletic, press man type of player that New England really likes. Is that a player that you could see maybe fitting in New England someday?
Yeah, and some people may view him as a safety. And the cool part about Delta State, their mascot is the Statesman, right? But the mascot is the fighting okra. So they have this fighting okra running around the field. So cool stuff about Delta State. They got a lot of prospects this year, to be honest. Marvin Terry is another edge rusher that they got that should get a free agent tryout if not so. But Falk is someone that he has great ball skills. He's physical. And when I was at the NFLPA Bowl, talking with some scouts, I put this in the article, like this dude, they were raving about him in terms of when they were sitting there meeting with him, in their private meetings that they do at these All-Star games. He's saying, oh man, I studied you guys and you guys ran these coverages. And I remember this specific game where, you guys tried to do this, but if you had me, I would have been able to make that play as opposed to what you had already out there. So not only just doing no scheme, but he was knowing personnel, and they were just so impressed with the football IQ from him. But he's someone that is a football junkie. He's been on the radar for quite some time. I thought he was going to come out last year, but he took advantage of that extra year. And his best game this season was against a team that was leveled up in Jackson State. So he played his best when they had to play their best. And he had a really good week at the NFLP. But I think as a safety, he probably fits more of what the Patriots would want as one of those combo safeties, guy that can play corner or safety. He ran like a 4.6, which is not blazing, but it's not slow. But for someone that has ball skills, I'm willing to take that over the speed, deficiencies, so to speak. But I've always been a big fan of Julius Falk.
Well, and if it's somebody who can play special teams too, if this is a later round guy or a priority free agent type of player, they're looking for guys that are first going to contribute in the kicking game. And then if they have all this stuff, the intelligence that you're talking about, the ball skills, the physicality, then maybe he can find his way onto the field. And they love these versatile safety, corner, safety, linebacker hybrids. They just signed Julius or Jabril Peppers, I should say. Didn't sign Julius Peppers. That would have been a different sort of story if they had brought that guy aboard. But they've got Kyle Duggar already, and they have Adrian Phillips. And so it's really interesting to see how they're building right now. Emory Hunt, thank you so much for shedding a little bit more light on what the Patriots might be able to do and bringing us some names of not just players, but schools as well that we don't know much about. Nobody better to have us on to break that stuff down. And again, if you're listening, make sure you go out. You should be following Emory at Football Gameplan on Twitter, but head over to my Twitter page as well. And I'll have his link to Football Gameplan's draft guide right there at the top. Fired up to dig into this thing. Like I said, I know you put so much work into it, Emory. And so I appreciate you sharing some of that work here with us now on Next Pats. All right, great stuff there from Emory. Really interesting to hear about Zion McCollum. This is a name that you're going to see in a lot of 7-round mock drafts. We all do them on the beat these days. Tremendous athlete from Sam Houston State. And we know the Patriots like athleticism at that position. Another couple of really good athletes. We mentioned Malcolm Butler in that conversation, but Darryl Roberts from Marshall, non-Power 5 conference. Think back to Keon Crossan from West Carolina. Tremendous athlete, just blew it up at his pro day that year, put him on the Patriots radar really. And he ends up coming to New England, being a special teamer, continues to play in the league in a real special teams role. So have to keep those really great athletes, even from small schools, in mind at corner for the Patriots. All right, let's get to Alec Pierce. Our conversation with Pierce was tremendous. He's in a place right now where I think he's able to have a little bit of downtime after preparing for the Senior Bowl, preparing for the Combine, preparing for his pro day after his season where he was second team All-American Athletic Conference last year in 2021. 52 catches, 884 yards, 17 yards per catch, 7 touchdowns in 14 games. First team academic All-American. This guy has a versatile athletic background, which we're going to get into. I think you're really going to like this conversation with Alec Pierce. And it seems as though the Patriots are interested as well. So let's get to our conversation with Alec right now. All right, very excited now to have with us Alec Pierce, Cincinnati wide receiver, becoming very quickly one of our favorite prospects in this year's draft class. We had Greg Cosell on the podcast last week talking up Alec Pierce.
He's a player that I really like. I mean, he's got stride length, body control, physical competitiveness. He's got hands.
I've been able to watch you a little bit, Alec. Ask some others in the league evaluators about what they think of you. Getting a lot of love this time of year. And so I said, if we could get Alec on the podcast, we should just go ahead and do that. So we're very excited to have you on, man. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Alec, the first thing I wanted to ask you, because we are Patriot focused, I think one of the most interesting things about covering this Patriots team is that it's so rare, right, to be run by one guy, have one head coach / general manager for 20 plus years. And even though Bill Belichick is fairly secretive, I think it's fair to say that about him. We know a lot about what he values, right? He values discipline. He values toughness, competitiveness. Sure. Guys come to New England and the conditioning even is a little bit different at times. I think some people think of it as old school, whatever you want to call it. The focus required, I think, is really ratcheted up here in New England relative to some other places. Just talking to players that have been other places and been here. in the past. And so when you hear those qualities, and you probably, Alec, understand, what the Patriots program means to a degree, because they've been a great program for just about as long as you've been alive. Mm-hmm. So when you hear all those things and you understand what you do about that program, why would you be a good fit?
I think I fit everything they look for and ask for in players. I've kind of always been a very selfless player. I was willing to do whatever it takes to win. And, I remember seeing something in that Tom Brady thing where all the guys would come out together, like they came out as one as a team. Like that to me, like I loved hearing that. So like when the introductions, do they do that? Do they do that all the time, or is it just that Super Bowl year?
So it started that Super Bowl year in 2001. They all went out together, and then it became sort of a tradition, certainly for the Patriots, but I think a lot of other teams sort of liked the idea of it too, and they adapted it as well. And so now you'll see a lot of teams kind of come out as a team for the Super Bowl.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah. No, yeah, like things like that. Special teams is another big thing. I think our program here at Cincinnati might be ran very similarly, and I know a lot of great programs that ran that. They put huge emphasis on special teams, and I've hearing from the Patriots, like that's a huge emphasis, and I know it is across the NFL for most teams, but the Patriots, like year in and year out, have very good special teams, and I think they put a lot of value on that. So yeah, probably those two things.
It's definitely something they value very highly. Bill Belichick was a special teams coach back in the day, and I know he feels like, when you emphasize that part of the game, you're emphasizing things like toughness and sacrifice because of what it takes to be successful on those units. You played a little, before we get into the receiver stuff, and don't get me wrong, I know the people that are listening to this right now want to hear you get into the receiver stuff, but I know you played a little bit of special teams back in the day, Alec. What do you think that says about your game and your approach?
I think for me, it was a way, and it speaks highly of my game, because it was a way for me in my freshman year, like 2018, came in, and I wasn't like ready to contribute as a wide receiver, but I was able to find a way to contribute to the team and basically help the team win. And I had a really good year on special teams. I made a bunch of tackles on kickoff and as a gunner. And like I got, they would give out special teams player of the game, and I got it multiple times as just like as a cover guy, like not even with returning the ball. So yeah, that's it was a huge part of like kind of getting my foot in the door here, and I use it as a way to really kind of propel myself to becoming that number one receiver and kind of make my mark on the program. So hopefully, I think it's another. I could probably do that in the NFL too.
That's what I wanted to follow up with. Do you see it in a similar way almost as you take this next step in your career as, okay, I know I want to be great as a receiver, but as I'm establishing myself, if the team needs me to do this other stuff in that third phase of the game, I can do that too. Is that how you're thinking about that? Moving forward here, would you be open to playing some special teams?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a great way to stick around the league. If things aren't really like, as a rookie, it's really hard to play as a rookie. So, but I want to be on the active roster, right? So like, say you're a backup receiver, you're like a fourth or fifth receiver, like you got to be on the special teams. And I know I'm a guy that can be on all four units of special teams. So I think it's a way like I can confidently say, like, as long as I'm healthy, like whatever team drafts me, like I will be on the active roster and helping the team win in one way or another.
Could be a versatile option for a team, whoever ends up drafting you in the spring, Alec, which makes sense given your background. I love reading about your background.
Yeah.
Lettered in not just football, but also volleyball, basketball, track, coming out of high school in the Chicago area. How do you think that diverse set of skills that you had to acquire to succeed in those other sports shows up on the football field for you?
I think, volleyball, obviously that really helped the jumping ability, and volleyball and basketball, being able to go up and get the ball, like high pointing the ball. In football, just the hand, like the coordination that takes, like it's very similar to, people all love saying, oh, it's like rebounding the basketball, but really it's even more similar to like hitting a volleyball, because that's even harder to do. The ball's coming from a distance and you got to time it perfectly. So yeah, I attribute to that to my volleyball background and basketball background. And then I think just, playing all those sports and just kind of playing sports all my life has really developed like the competitiveness in me. So like just always doing that and always playing sports, like I obviously had to love playing sports. So like I was just, what fueled me all the time was just my competitiveness. Like I always wanted to win in every single thing I did. So
I love hearing that description of the volleyball skill set and how that translates, because you're right. In basketball, there aren't that many opportunities for you to catch a ball, or have to use, your hand-eye coordination in terms of how your body is relating to a ball in space from 20 yards away. It just doesn't, very rarely, unless you're catching a lob from half court or somebody's throwing you a long outlet pass or something like that.
Yeah.
So you have that skill set. Clearly it's all over your tape. What is your mentality though in those spots, Alec? Because there's play after play after play where it's basically you in a corner or you in a corner and a safety, and everybody's going for that football. And, everyone in theory has an equal shot at it, but you seem to come down with more than your fair share. So what's your mentality in those spots?
I'd say the biggest thing is just like, it's my ball or nobody else's. Like, so I'm going up there and I'm getting that ball. And, if they do happen to make a great play on it and go up and get there, like, I'm not letting them get the ball either. Like, it's either ending up in my hands or on the ground. Cause that was a big thing, just the nature of our program. Like, we were we like to control the game. We ran the ball a lot. So like they did not want to have turnovers. They did not want to. So if they're throwing the ball up, like, it took them a while to kind of establish that they could just kind of throw the ball up to me, because that was kind of against all their, they liked kind of being like lower risk type things. But so I had to basically prove them. I'm like, if I ever let the ball get intercepted, like, it'd probably take away from my chances of getting it thrown like that again. So like that's what I'd make sure, like, even in practice and stuff, like, I'm, sometimes the quarterback gets hit or whatever, and the ball might be like bad, short or whatever. Then you just turn to the DB and you got to break it up. But yeah, when I'm up there in the air like that, that's my ball. I'm going and getting it.
Well, and another one of the reasons why, we've enjoyed talking about you so much these last few weeks here, Alec, is because, it's my understanding from talking to people around the league that the Patriots are looking for size and speed at that receiver position. It's just something that they're lacking a little bit right now in their receiver room. And they're a team that has been so run heavy the last couple of years that they're facing defenses that are allowing opposing receivers, Patriots receivers, to sort of be left on an island on the outside. And so when we watch you play and you're out there and it's one-on-one, you have an inherent advantage because of your catch radius and your size and your jumping ability to be able to win those one-on-one matchups, which I think would make you really attractive to the Patriots as well. So the bigger body really helps you in that regard. When it comes to route running, Alec, I want to ask you about that as well, because you've got more mass than most receivers do when it comes to starting and stopping and creating separation, all those kinds of things. So I wanted to ask you just how you attack your stems, how you approach your route running with the body type that you have to be able to create that separation that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think it's all about being Chris. My receiver coach in college he would call it McDonald's, like a McDonald's crayon route. Like, if you went out there and like, it's like we draw them on the whiteboard, right? You draw it up. And like, if someone just drew one that had no definition, like, that's not how you want to run a route. Like, he'd say, like, it's like you drew it with a McDonald's crayon, like, just kind of, you can't really see the cuts and stuff like that. So like, it's all about being violent, putting your foot in the ground and changing direction, because that's where you get the separation. You're not, especially at the next level, you're not going to be able to just run past people and use your speed to win. I mean, unless, there's probably very few guys that can do that. You got to be really fast to do that. So yeah, you got to be able to put your foot in the ground and create separation like that. Give the quarterback a window to hit you.
Plenty of explosiveness based on what you did at the combine. I mean, the 4.41 40 plus inch vertical. I mean, that would indicate that you have that, not just the speed, but the explosiveness too, to be able to change direction the way you're talking about. Alec, I want to ask you, as you are running those routes, just for those of us that, might not be familiar with the coaching points that you guys had at Cincinnati, how often are you and the other receivers there reading out the coverage as the play is developing and adjusting based off that? Is that something that you did at Cincinnati? And I only ask because I know that's something that, the Patriots ask of their receivers, and it can be a difficult thing to transition into. Not impossible, but maybe a little bit difficult if you don't have experience doing it previously.
Yeah, we had reads for sure. Not as I've been getting into the NFL playbooks a little bit and seeing how crazy something like, sometimes you got like 3 or 4 different routes you can run based on coverages, but we would have mostly like things would convert if like on the outside, if I had comebacks or shorter routes, they convert against cloud coverage, like cover 2 corner. And then a lot of our stuff would convert to fades against press. And then when I'd move into the slot, that's when I had more of the reads. Like I'd have like a middle field open, middle field closed read. So like we call it a middle read. I'd be running a basically like if the middle field was open, like cover 2 or cover 4. I'd run a through route, like a post, right down the middle of the field. And then if it closed off, I'd run a dig, a 12-yard basic was what we called it. So yeah, that was like we didn't have the most complicated reads, but we had a little bit of reads in there.
You got a taste of it. It for sure. I mean, that just even reading out the safety coverage and adjusting based off that, I think, that's something that certainly translates. We hear about guys talking about that at the next level all the time. I mean, however it worked at Cincinnati, 17 plus yards per catch over the course of your career. I'd say you were making some pretty good reads in those moments, man. I wanted to ask you though, post Cincinnati career, you go to the Senior Bowl, and that's something we're always very focused on here because the Patriots love the Senior Bowl guys. I mean, it's just every single year, multiple players that are down there at Mobile, Alabama, end up here in Foxborough. Tell us a little bit about why that experience was maybe so beneficial to you. And I'd love to hear, we could kind of flip this around and you could kind of put your scouting hat on, because I'd love to hear who the best corner was that you saw down there this year.
Yeah. For me, the Senior Bowl was great. It was just like it was an incredible opportunity. It's really cool to go out there and meet all the guys. You hear all these guys' names, big time players, see them making plays on SportsCenter, stuff like that. So it was cool to go out there and meet them. And then it was also a really good experience to just kind of get that first taste of like NFL coaching and the NFL playbook. You had to like learn the installs, and you were super pressed on time with all the interviews and stuff going on. So you would like kind of had to like stress. You're a little stressed trying to learn the plays and stuff. So I think that was a good little like taste of how the NFL probably is, because I'm sure that's how fall camp goes, and how it's probably can be a little tough on rookies. So it was good to get a little taste of that and know what I'm walking into, especially once I get drafted.
Anybody in particular that stood out at corner that was a nice challenge for you?
I mean, I wouldn't go against Kobe at all. Like we had a like, he's like, we're not gonna do this to each other, right? Like we're both out here to like look good. Like we can't right. both win if we're going against each other. So we didn't even go against each other all week. But I know he got player of the week for like the DBs. He was making a lot of plays out there. So like that's when I was talking to all the receivers, they thought he was the best corner on our team.
Cincinnati loaded up with talent this year. It'll be a lot of fun to see where you guys all go as you spread across the NFL. Last question I want to ask you, Alec. Be honest now. Say the Patriots draft you in the spring. You understand that the weather here in New England isn't amazing, but you're used to that. So are you dying to go to a warm weather place? If the Patriots draft you, what's the feeling just when it comes to the climate alone? Okay. I know you're going to be excited. Your dream's coming true. You're a pro athlete. Do you like playing in the cold or no?
Yeah, I don't mind it at all. Like I'm a guy that never wears sleeves. Like I grew up high school, they never let us wear sleeves. And like for everyone out there, I'm from Glen Ellen, Illinois. It's a suburb of Chicago. So we would never wear sleeves. And like, I know we played in snow before, stuff like that. So like, to me, it's normal. I know in college here, I'd always complain when they put the bubble up over our practice facility and we're practicing indoors, like starting in like late October. And I'm like, come on, it's 50 degrees out. Like this is great football weather. Like, so yeah, I mean, I haven't played in any NFL weather where it's like 0 degrees, but I've got down there into the probably 20s and snowing.
I can tell you what, Alec, if you do end up coming to Foxborough, you're going to love it here because they never practice inside. It could be blizzard. It could be 25-mile-an-hour winds. It could be rain, sleet, snow, anything. You're going to be outside because Bill Belichick wants those guys outside. Alec Pierce, thanks so much for being with us here on the Next Pats podcast, man. Been great to learn a little bit more about your background and hear how you approach your craft. So again, thanks so much for spending some time and good luck with the rest of the pre-draft process here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
There you have it. There's Alec Pierce. Great to hear from him. Again, one of Greg Cosell's favorites, quickly becoming a Next Pats favorite. My understanding is the Patriots actually sent their special teams coordinator, Cam Accord, to Cincinnati to take in the pro day. I think the Patriots would be open to using Pierce, even if they're willing to take him as high as the second round. And I'm not sure where they would have him graded on their board right now. But again, those second round picks, whether they're made on the offensive side or the defensive side, those guys are expected oftentimes to play in the kicking game. And it sounds like Pierce not only has done that, but is open to doing that. And if the Patriots are sending their special teams coordinator to Cincinnati's pro day to get a closer look at Pierce, maybe chat him up in terms of what his willingness would be to play in that phase of the game, I think that all bodes well for Pierce's chances at the next level and potentially his chances here in New England. So that'll do it, guys, for this week's edition of Next Pats. Thanks to Emory Hunt. Thanks to Alec Pierce. Thanks to you all for listening, hearing some nuggets from the league meetings. Hopefully you'll be able to go over to NBCSportsBoston.com, check out our latest mock draft. We'll have plenty more draft conversation next week. We've got about a month left of draft prep before we finally get to draft weekend, the most exciting time of the year for yours truly. Hopefully it is for you as well. Looking forward to talking to you guys next week.